So guys, first job of the day. I'm ahead of me game and I am putting the liners in this Cosworth block. This is not your usual 200 block, which we normally put the liners in. This is a ductile iron liner we are talking about here. This is a 205 block, guys. Don't normally put the liners in the 205 block, but the reason I am with this one is because it had a porous bore. Now, the porous bore was not so evident on first inspection, but once we have bored it out for the liners, it is more obvious. So you can see I've got 3 in already, guys. And if we have a look down there, look, I don't know whether you can because let me go and get the light and you'll be able to see a little bit more clearer. So this is very unusual actually, for it to go porous like this. It's obviously, at once upon a time in its life, been sitting with water in the block with no antifreeze, and it's probably corroded from the inside out. Now, these blocks are fairly thin in this area, but if I get the torch down there, look, you can see where it is actually broke through. Round the back of there is quite thin in the centre. So down the bottom, where you've got the base, and up the top, it's very thick, but then in the middle, it is actually quite thin into the water jacket. So if you've got corrosion in an area that breaks through, it's going to be pretty thin in that area. But the advantage with putting the liner in is you can see down there, look, I put some of our 620 Loctite in there, and that's like a holding compound. So I'll put some of that down the bottom, some in the area where the pitting is, where it's broke through, because it's nice and thick at the top of the block, and also down the bottom. Once you push the liner in, it's going to seal absolutely perfect. So that water isn't going to go either up through the top of the liner or down into the oil gallery. But just as a belt and braces, we put that Loctite down there, and that just seals it anyway. So we're going to push this one in, guys. So it's a usual thing. We just line it up, obviously making sure that we've got a nice radius, or a nice sort of radius there on the inside. So in there where the flange is, if you can see, it's got a bit of a cutout, but you don't want a sharp hedge on this inside here, so it's going to give you a false bottom out. The flange depth is correct, so we're going to have about 5 or 10 thou protruding on top of the block, and that'll give us a lovely amount there to just face off and get a nice level face onto the top of the block. So what we do, guys, liner on there, and then what I do is just push the liner in about 5 or 10 mil, and then take the weight off and just let it centralise itself. Then this block which we push on the top, we just push just very slightly on the inside of that radius, and that allows it, so once we push it down, that block there doesn't foul on the next liner. And then what we do, guys, is just lower the table, and we put our 2 bars, one there and one in the opposite direction, 90 degrees, and that basically just allows the liner to centralise itself, because you're pushing on literally one point right in the middle of the liner, and all that does is account for any sort of inaccuracies between the bottom of that ram and the bed of the table there that the block is sitting on. Because if it's not absolutely parallel, which it's not going to be because this thing is just on 4 screws, then it's going to try and push that liner in on the piss, and the further down you go, the more stress it's going to put itself under. It's going to crack something. So this is going up now. We're at about 2 ton, and you can sort of get to grips. This is about 3 thou interference, so it's lovely, and you can just hear it. It sounds like it's just trying to be resistant. Push it in with about 4 or 5 ton of pressure for a split second, and we release the weight, take the bars off, take the block off there, and that is absolutely bang on, guys. So we've got all 4 in now. Next step is to ball this block, and then I'm going to face it, then hone it, and it's all done. Job done. So next little job for this same customer, same engine, just put our 620 back up on the shelf. See, I've got the rods here laid out with the old piston rings. So what he did say is check the pistons out. If they're any good, we'll use them with these liners, because obviously I can bore it back to standard. They're a standard piston, and the pistons look absolutely immaculate. Two things to look for on these pistons, well, three things. One is any cracks. Two, that the skirt measures absolutely what it should do. There's no wear or distortion or anything in the piston. And thirdly, make sure that the top ring groove, when the piston ring is in, there's no up and down movement on the piston, because if there is, it means that the groove in the piston is worn, and it's no good. So if it's a nice fit with no up and down movement, that piston is going to be absolutely fine to use. So what we've done is took the pistons off the rods, took all the old rings off. He's going to put a new set of rings on, obviously. We're going to blast those pistons. I'm going to take 10 thou off the top of the pistons to account for how much I'm taking off the top of the block, and just to make sure we got the jut out correct. And then we can put them back on the rods and send it all on its way to him. So it's going to, with a set of rings, you're talking probably 100 quid for a set of rings, but it saved him probably 400 odd quid for a set of pistons and rings. So if we can save money, guys, there's no point throwing it down the drain just for no reason if those pistons are in perfect order. So guys, the next block on the boring bar before I start boring out the Cosworth is this lovely MGTC. So a nice old rare beastie now. You can see, look, the MG emblem there cast into the block. It's lovely. So what we're doing with this is putting liners in it, guys. It was out to its maximum, needed a rebore, so we've obviously got to put liners in it to go back to standard. Now this is the liner I found off the shelf. You've got two options with the liners, as I've said to you before. We can have a liner specially made, so that would be a bespoke liner to the exact dimensions to what you want, which is going to take, at the moment, probably 5 to 6 weeks of turnaround. Or you can order one off the shelf if they've got it, which is going to be 2 or 3 days. So massive difference on the time frame. Plus the cost, you're looking at about £45 plus the VAT for one of these standard cast liners. Whereas you're looking at about 110 for a liner that you've got to have bespoke made. The only thing is with this liner, guys, is I've had to find the best fitting liner with the dimensions closest to what I need, really. So the first things first, when you're looking for a liner off the chart, is the internal diameter. You need it small enough that you can obviously bore it out to the size that you want. So we've done that. Obviously, I want to fit a flange liner, because if I can, that is the one I always fit. And so I found this one here. And next thing, you've got to make sure the outside diameter is not going to be too big that it removes all of the casting out of the block. So this one here is about almost 2 mil thicker than the original wall thickness. So it's not too bad. We can get away with that nice and easy. But the inside diameter is way under. So we've got quite a bit to chomp out once they're in. Next thing is the flange depth. I'm doing it to about 160 thou deep, so I'm going to have to put this in the lathe and turn that flange down so to just over that, so it doesn't protrude all this way. If I left it protruding, it'd be about 5 mil. It's going to take quite a lot of time on the grinder to take that down. And the next thing is the overall length, guys. We're looking for something around 6 inches, but this is about a 9-inch one. So what I've done is I've took into account, obviously, how deep the flange is, measured the depth of the bore where we need to go to, and you see this line here. I've scribed a line compared to underneath there all the way around, and that is the line we need to go to on the lathe. And the next thing we need to do while it is in the lathe is I need to, once I've got the overall length to where I need it to, I need to machine a taper on the inside of the back side of this liner. And the reason for that is because the pistons on this block, because the big end of the rod is bigger than the piston, they need to be loaded in from underneath. So obviously with the rings on the pistons, you put a nice taper on the inside of this bore and it allows it to just go in a lot easier. If you didn't have that taper, you can't get a ring clamp in there. I'm doing it with the usual 3 thou interference. I've done one bore already, so let's get this thing chomped out, guys. Unfortunately, it's liner week. Right, guys, this is a little bit of a weird one, but I'm going to answer what quite a lot of people have actually asked me over the couple of years of me doing this channel. What would I have liked to have been if I weren't an engine builder? Well, If we go back to when I was at school, or when any of us are at school, in high school, you get to about 15 years old, the pressure's on, you start seeing the careers officer, don't you? What do you want to do when you're older? I mean, there's going to be the odd one, let's be honest, that sort of knows the avenue they want to go. They either want to go into medicine or a school teacher. When I was at school, it seemed like unless you wanted to do either one of them, you had no hope, or there was definitely no sort of suggestions. But really, I would say the majority of us, who knows what the hell you want to be when you're older, when you're 16 years old? I mean, you've only been alive for 16 years, and nearly all of that you've been sort of relying on your parents, messing about, and just hanging about with your mates. So you've got no life experience, especially with work. I mean, I had a paper round, but that was about it. Yeah, I don't know. I do not know. To be honest with you, I did what probably a lot of people do. I sort of went into the avenue steered into by your parents. Although I lived with my mum and my stepdad was always an engineer. He was quite high up, you know, a very successful sort of engineer. And that was the avenue, the sort of only avenue really that I sort of knew of. So that was just the avenue I ended up taking. But really, I mean, apart from that, how do you know what you want to be? And to be honest, to this day, if I sort of look back, I've ended up doing this. I mean, I did an apprenticeship for 4 years in mechanical engineering, machine setting, etc. Left there, was a tool maker for a year and a half. Then I moved to London for a year, took a sort of year out. And then when I moved back, I got straight into this, luckily, because it was sort of who I know. I knew someone that managed to get me the job. Brian, that used to work here, was just leaving. So it sort of worked well, and I walked straight into the job. I didn't really know, as much as I was into cars, I didn't know anything about engines. I was just an engineer, to be honest. But I sort of got into it because, you know, I'm interested in cars, interested in engines. But I was just sort of an engineer, and I just ended up being an engineer. So if I was to sit down and think, what would I have liked to have been apart from if I wasn't this, the answer's going to be, I don't know, to be honest with you. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I would like to have been a doctor, because I wouldn't. I wouldn't like to, the work, academically, I couldn't really be bothered with that, let's be honest. The paperwork side of it, even on my apprenticeship, I did struggle a bit with it, although I sort of did all right. I was always one of those at school where on the report it was, "He's a very capable lad, could have done better." That was because I didn't like paperwork. I'd rather just mess around with my mates, to be honest with you. It's not big and it's not clever, but that was just me. That's just, you know, everyone's different. And if the world was full of doctors, there wouldn't be anyone building engines, would there? So I don't know, guys. I really don't know what I would have liked to have been if I wasn't an engine builder. I think, personally, if there's any youngsters out there not knowing what they're going to be when they leave school or college or whatever, I would say, as long as you've got something well paid enough to actually live, and you don't feel sick on a Sunday because you've got to go into work on a Monday, then you're not going far wrong in my eyes. Well, guys, I am sorting out the bits for the Rover V8 down there that I've got to send off to balancing, while simultaneously eating a quality street from Christmas, thanks to one of our suppliers. So, block's nearly done. Just told you about that. The crank has been ground, I think it has. I think it's been ground. It's down there. Now I've got to get all these bits ready to send to CTM to get the crank balance, because obviously we can't do the V8s. But what I can do before I send it is I can balance the rods and the pistons. So these are all the new pistons. And what I do is I have to weigh all the pistons, get all those the same, size the rods or check the rod housings, torque them all up, torque up the big ends here, measure the housings. If they all need to be sized, we'll size them. Then we balance them end for end. Then we've got to get the bearings, the crank bearings, although I think we may have got those. So basically what we've got to do is balance all the rods, balance all the pistons, make sure they're all the same. Then we have to send off the crankshaft with the front pulley assembly, the clutch and flywheel assembly, and we have to send off one piston and rod set. So that'll be the rod with the big end shells. We can't put the pistons on the rod because it says shrink fit, so we have to fit those last. We have to send a piston with all the rings and circlips and the gudgeon pins, just one set, and then they take that as an overall weight and sort of know where they are. So that is what I'm doing at the moment, guys, and I'm going to get that in our box, which over here underneath the BMW wheels. We keep that box purposely to send stuff to CTM, so I'm going to be sending that, and I'm going to also be sending a cylinder head that they've got to do a bit of work to. So I'm just getting pretty organised, really, all these little farty jobs for when Isaac gets back, because we need to be cracking on with some engines and getting some money back in, because it's been a fairly hectic year. This year we are not going to be doing too much spending on vehicles, as I've said. We're going to be having a look at maybe a couple of pieces of new machinery, seeing what that sort of price range is on maybe a milling machine, boring bar if we can, and sort of go from there, really. But yeah, going to make a few changes this year, but I need to be getting a few of these sort of fartiest jobs out. Once I've done this and got these in the box, I'm then going to get the 5-cylinder Audi Quattro engine up here, bottom end, and I'm going to check all the clearances on that. So I'll stick that in a video. Thank you very much for watching. Till another video, where hopefully Isaac's going to be back on the channel. Yes. Have a great evening. We'll see you then. Cheers, guys.